So I thank God that though it's forming, it cannot prosper. Of course, continue to follow me by way of social media at Rasby G. Mason on Facebook, at ImpactChurch South on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can find me at Bishop R.G. Mason II and ImpactChurch 247. And so, guys, without further ado, I'd like to call your attention to the word of the Lord that can be found in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 7. 2 Kings chapter 7. Now this morning I'm moving like a man whose house is on fire, and so I'm asking for latitude as we endeavor to expound upon what the Lord has shared with us. Of course, we have visited this particular text for the sum of about 2 to 3 weeks, and of course we have coined this as a series of messages, and we're going to progressively move to the next phase very hurriedly with your prayers as I solicit them. Please forgive me. I want to love on everybody on today as we normally do. I don't have a lot of time for extensive fellowship because I'll be catching a plane shortly, so I just want to put that disclaimer out there, because you know the worst thing you can get charged with in the hood is acting funny. Your neighbor say, don't be acting funny. And so I don't want you to think I'm acting funny today. 2 Kings chapter 7. And we shall pay particular attention to verses 3 and 4. You have it, say amen. You don't have it, say preacher, I'm coming. 2 Kings chapter 7, verses 3 and 4. And it reads, "And there were 4 leprous men at the entering in of the gate. And they said one to another, Why sit we here until we die?" In order to understand the potency of that statement, you have to understand the severity of their condition. Because leprosy was akin to modern day AIDS. There was no cure. In fact, since medicine had not been advanced to the slightest degree, it was an initial death sentence. You could be walking and your limbs could fall off. You could be talking and your vocal cords could shut down. Lesions and abrasions would appear on your skin, and you would find yourself in excruciating pain while simultaneously having to suffer ostracism. Here is where they are. And so they asked the question, why sit in this same place if we already died? If we say we will enter into the city, there's a famine in the city, and we shall die there. In other words, if we go into the city, there's no food, we'll die of hunger. But if we sit here, we're going to die of leprosy. He said, "Now therefore, let us fall into the host of the Syrians. If they save us alive, we shall live." In other words, let's go into the enemy's camp. And all the enemy is probably going to do is just try to capture us, because they don't live by our Levitical laws. They don't adhere to the same statutes that the Jews adhere to. So they probably can suffer with our condition, but yet place us in bondage. They say, if they save us alive, we shall live. And if they kill us, we shall but die. And so we see 3 possible deadly outcomes. If they sit in place, they'll die of leprosy. If they go into the city, they'll die of famine. If they go and submit themselves to the Syrians, they may die by the hands of the enemy. So these lepers decide, we dying anyway, we might as well take a chance. And for a little while I want to continue to talk from this thought. You can either plan for your future or prepare for your funeral. Look at your neighbor, say, neighbor, you can plan for your future or prepare for your funeral. That's what I want to talk about. Father, help me preach this under your power. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Ushers, you may be seated. In the book entitled The Adventures of Alice in Wonderland, the English mathematician and logician by the name of Lewis Carroll writes these words. He says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. What this master of math and lord of logic intimates to you and I is that if in life you desire to go nowhere, all you have to do is continue to do nothing. And sadly enough, I found that the road that leads to oblivion is always congested, but the road that leads to opportunity is rarely crowded. And this is because most people find it easier to engage in mindless movement as opposed to accepting the cognitive challenge that's connected to the path that God has set for us that ultimately leads to the fulfillment of God's plan. And consequently, many of us fall into the hands of the enemy because we fail to live a life of purpose, although we have been supernaturally endowed with what I'd like to coin as purpose for living. And this is simply because we are ignorant mainly of God's plan. May I submit then for your cognitive consideration that God has a plan for your life in spite of what you're currently experiencing in your life. In fact, he told Jeremiah in 29:11, I read the NIV version, for I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and to give you a future. May I further then suggest that God's plan for your life is supernaturally, intentionally interconnected with some of the pain that you have going on in your life. The problem with many of us is when we experience the pain, the extreme situations and extirpations that's associated with the purpose and the destiny that God has for us, we mistakenly confuse and sometimes identify perfection as persecution. Let me rewind it. I messed it up. Because sometimes we have the tendency to view what God is doing from the wrong perspective. What we call persecution, God sometimes calls perfection. And pain without a purpose is persecution, but pain within God's plan is perfection. You ought to pull out your phone and text your neighbor and say, neighbor, I was tripping because I thought I was being persecuted, but now I'm shouting because I found out I was being perfected. Of the stuff that I was subjected to, the things that I'm currently in right now, the reason I can do what James told me to do is because I understand who's in control of what I'm going through. James said, count it all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience, which means my pain sometimes ought to produce a praise. Sometimes I ought to shout on credit. Sometimes I ought to cut a jig in the midst of what I'm going through, simply because I understand that though it may not feel good to me, I understand that God is going to work it out for me. Any Bible readers in here that can identify with Romans 8:20, all things work together for good for them that are love the Lord and who are the called according to his purpose. But here is my problem. Sometimes it's not the issue, Jackson, that I don't believe that God knows what he's doing, but sometimes my problem is I have no idea of what he's doing. I'm nosy by nature. I need to know what you're doing, God, when you're going to do it and how you're going to do it. And when you exclude me from the intimate details of the plan that you have for my life, I sometimes get offended. After all, it's my life and I ought to be able to know. But isn't it amazing how although it's your life, he treats it like it's his life that he gave to you? And since it is his life that he gave to you, he has the right to do what he wants to do in your life in order to fulfill the plan that he had for your life. Somebody shout, God's got a plan for me. Consequently, there are times when my impatience and impetuousness and insubordination gets the best of me temporarily, and sometimes I have a tendency to meddle in and mess up what God is trying to set up. And I was asking God, how can I make them relate to what I'm trying to say? God took me back, Renee, to our childhood when Mama used to make cakes. She didn't make these box cakes like some of y'all do, but Mama made her cakes from scratch, and she had her own flour and her own butter and her own eggs and her own baking soda and her own milk. But here is what she did, Jessica, that I didn't like. Long before I got a chance to lick the spoon, lick the blender, and take my finger around the bowl, somebody know what I'm talking about. Mama had a rule. She said, don't come in this kitchen with my cake in the oven. You gonna make my cake fall. Somebody know what I'm. Mama said, don't you allow your impetuous nature and don't you allow your impatience to ruin what I'm trying to prepare for everybody. And you thought I was talking about my mama and her cake, but God said, don't you allow your impatience and your impetuous nature and your insurgence and your insubordination to allow yourself to mess up what I'm trying to set up on your behalf. Somebody shout, God's setting something up, and he's doing it behind my back, but it's about to manifest in the front of my face. And somebody ought to shout, God, you can set me up because I know you know exactly what you are doing. Now, when it comes to planning, someone said that planning is deciding in advance what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and who is going to do it. In essence, what this intimates to you and I is planning is supposed to consist, Jonathan, of conceptualization, which means I have to cognitively reason within my mind, and I have to formulate a picture of where I plan to go and what I'm looking for God to do. But the problem many times with this degree of spiritual conceptualization is what I see in my future don't look like my present. And since the contradiction in my present is sometimes too painful for me to maintain the proper perception of my future, I have the tendency to get out of place and out of position because I get too frustrated waiting on God. Don't you look at me with that sanctimonious look on your face, and don't look at me like I'm the only one that sometimes get impatient and get mad with God because God, you said you were going to do it, and I thought you were going to do it by now, but since you have not done it, I begin to question if you ever told me to do it in the first place. The next stage is construction. Sometimes there's a great gulf between conceptualization and construction because God has to prepare me for what he's about to build for me. And if I don't allow him to prepare me, then he cannot build for me what he has for me. It does not mean he doesn't want me to have it, but I'm not simply ready to handle it. Here comes the question, can you handle the blessing? If God gave you everything you've been praying for, are you in position to handle it? God, I want a man, but you don't clean up now. God, I want a woman, but you don't work now. God, I want $1 million, well, you don't pay bills now. Are you in position to handle what you've been asking God for? And sometimes God has to maneuver us to put us in the proper place in order to navigate us down the path that's going to lead to the fulfillment of purpose, but this only comes through God's divine plan. The next one is commitment, because you've got to make some decisions now, Nikki, and you've got to draw some lines in the sand, because if I'm going to choose to do one thing, simultaneously I've got to refuse to do another thing. My commitment to this means I've got to break my commitment to that. If I want to go forward, I can't keep looking backwards. Y'all ain't got it yet. Okay. If I want my own man, I can't share your man. Y'all. Okay. If I want my own house, I can't keep trying to live in your house. Y'all mad now. What God is saying is, I've got got to get you ready in a position where you make some commitments and decide that I will no longer do that for this. Y'all still ain't got it. You want to be skinny, but you want to eat at the same time. Okay, you want to lose weight, but you don't want to work out. God said you got to refuse one thing. Y'all got it now. I knew if I went there, y'all would get tender. You got to refuse one thing in order to choose another thing. But then there is connection, because you cannot fulfill the plan of God that he has for your life by yourself. I don't care who is lying to you and who've been lying to themselves. There's nothing you can do by yourself. You need somebody in your life who's going to partner with you and help you get to the place where you're going. And I know you're standoffish, reclusive by nature. You're an introvert and not an extrovert, but sometimes you've got to change your ways. Sometimes you've got to be willing to operate outside of the box and your normal way of doing things, because God never sends what you need. He sends who you need, who has what you... Okay, I know every time I say that, folk get mad with me, but boo, when the last time you prayed and God sent a check down from heaven? When was the last time you prayed and mystically and magically your light bill was paid? When was the last time you prayed and gas just came in your tank? God sends who you need, who has what you need, so he can meet your needs. And if you quit turning out who you need, you will get what you need. But some of us are too standoffish. Some of us just ugly for nothing. Can I be messy for a moment? Some of y'all too ugly to be ugly. You so ugly, you ought to have a nice personality. You ever met somebody so ugly they ought to say, excuse me? But the problem many times is this. We have this tendency to believe the lie of the enemy that we can do things by ourselves. But somebody shout, we need connection. But then there must be communication, because if you're going to strengthen the connection, there's got to be communication. How can I know how to help you if you don't tell me how to help you? The problem is we want people to supernaturally discern what's going on, and then you get mad when people don't come to your rescue. I've learned this in pastoring. People want you to be a prophet at all times. You want me to be able to supernaturally know when you hurt your toe. You want me to be able to discern when you're going through something debilitating. But see, sometimes you got to pick up the phone and tell me what's going on, so you can have no quarrels with why nobody came to your rescue. Well, here is the reality. If you're going to fulfill the plan of God, you have got to begin to make connections. Planning is such an essential part of our everyday lives. Did you know they've dedicated an entire field to planning? In planning, there are subfields in the field of planning, Brother Holmes. There is architectural planning and business planning and comprehensive planning and contingency planning and economic planning and environmental planning. They even truly have invent planning. But here is the problem. May I submit for your cognitive consideration that all of these areas of planning and the methods associated to the plan that gives birth to the movement have been proven to be ergonomic, have been proven to be efficient. However, when it comes to the plan of God, they have absolutely no place, because you can go to school and still not understand God's plan. You can become a skillful expert at planning a party and still can't plan your future. You can plan economics but still can't plan your future, because when God planned your future, he consulted with the God council and nobody else, and he alone knows what you need today in order to get you to your tomorrow. I just said something, you missed your shout. What you're going through today is connecting you to your tomorrow. Somebody ought to shout real good right now, because you understand that this is not what God has planned for me permanently. This is what I've got to endure temporarily. The more you think that you know God's plan, Brian, the more you understand that you don't know God's plan at all. The more you think you know what you've been called to do for him, the more you realize that it's virtually impossible to do what you've been called to do for him without him. Katanya, I'll rewind that. Let me say it again. It's impossible to do what you've been called to do for him without him. Oh, you need Bible. Philippians 2:12 says, wherefore, my beloved brethren, my beloved, you have always obeyed, not in my presence only, but now in my absence. Watch this. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Okay. This seems to suggest that God rested solely upon me to do what he's called me to do for him. I wouldn't want to serve a God like that. Because if you're going to tell me what to do, but won't tell me how to do it, if you're going to tell me how to do it, but won't help me do it, then I don't want to be a part of you. Ben Franklin said something. I'm going to mess this quote up. And so I'm going to quote edit instead of quoting it. But he said, if you tell me what to do, I can do it momentarily. He said, but if you show me how to do it, I can do it for a lifetime. Aren't you glad that God not only tells you what to do, but he shows you how to do it? And sometimes you miss what he's showing you because you're waiting for him to come down and show you when he sent people in your life to show you. Matter of fact, while I'm preaching, he's showing you. And so what God wants to do is put you in a position where he then develops that inward man that you have resonated within you to be independent, but yet he still wants you to be codependent. Okay, I got Bible. I just told you in Philippians 2:12 that he said you got to work out your own salvation. But look at what verse 13 says in Philippians 2. He said, for it is God which worketh inside of you both the will and to do for his good pleasure. Which means God not only tells you what to do, but he puts something on the inside of you that helps you to get it done. And God said there are times when that which is within you is not sufficient to help you face what's without, or that which is going on outside with you. And that's when God steps in as a referee in a boxing match and tells the devil, that's enough. I'm not going to let you kill him. I'm not going to let you take her joy. I'm not going to let you make them crazy. I'm not going to let you take everything they have. I've got to step in to protect my investment. Aren't you glad? Is there anybody in here God had to step in before? Aren't you glad? Anybody God had to break up the fight? But aren't you glad? Anybody God had to rescue? Somebody shout, I'm glad about it. Y'all sit down, you're going to make me nervous. Listen, in this season, you're going to need a plan in order to be productive. I got to say that again. In this season, you're going to need a plan in order to be productive. No more getting up, waking up when you feel like it, doing something. You've got to have your plan in place. You've got to be deciding on today what you want to do tomorrow, Pastor Johnson. Can I tell you what that's called? That's called forward thinking. Forward thinking says today is the tomorrow that I saw yesterday. Which means while you were over here today, Orlando, I was in today on yesterday. And while you crying today, boo, I'm already in tomorrow. Because I've got a future, I've got a hope, and I've got an end. And that's why I can't let where I am now abort where God is trying to take me. Here it is. What God is saying is, I've got a plan for your life, and it's not just any plan, Pastor J, but it's a divine plan, which means this, which means you're going to have to start talking to God before you attempt to start working for God. Okay, let me flash my light like Men in Black and take that back. You're going to have to start talking to God before you attempt to work for God. Problem is, we got too many workers and we ain't got enough talkers. You trying to do a work for God and you ain't even talk to him so he can tell you what to do. Sometimes you got to fall on your face and you got to go back to the Baptist hymn. Father, I stretch my hands to thee. No other help I know if thou withdraw thyself from me. Whether God, I have no idea how to preach. I have no idea how to pay. I don't know how to be nobody's daddy. I don't know how to be nobody's mama. I don't know how to run no business. I don't know how to be a good employee. I don't even know how to be a good son. God, tell me what you need me to do so I can be what you called me to be. When was the last time you prayed before you did what you do? When was the last time? I know you don't do anything spiritual. I know you ain't called to ministry like me. I know you flip burgers and fries, but you ought to be prophesying over them fries. These gonna be some juicy fries. These ain't gonna be no dry fries. I mean, you ought to just be speaking and you ought to be just talking because you have something resonating within you that gives you the edge. May I submit then for your redundant reflection that you've got to be careful when you ask God for a plan, because the plan of God does not always make sense. In fact, it will always be beyond, watch this, first of all, your approval. Reverend Wilson, it'll be beyond your approach. Because you said, God, no, I wouldn't have done that like that. But God said, I'm glad you're not me. Because had you done it your way, you would still be in trouble. As a matter of fact, doing it your way means standing in your own way. He said, but aren't you glad I do it for you? And when you get messed up, I release what I call the guard dogs of purpose, great goodness, and mercy to put you back on track. The plan of God is not only beyond our approval and approach, but it's beyond my aptitude, because sometimes I can't even fathom how God ever done something for you and you just got the stink face. Because you can't even believe he that bad. Oh my God. Me? You did that for me? Sometimes it's just beyond my aptitude. But see, the plan of God supersedes my affluence, because sometimes I don't have the money. Sometimes I don't have the capital nor the gain to do what I need to do. But God has already worked within his plan what I'm supposed to do and how it's going to get done. But almost sometimes it's beyond my ability. Now here is where you really got to pay attention. If you get this, we can go home. Anything you can do for God without God didn't come from God. Because it is the reality, watch this, believer, that anything he calls you to do, he's already factored in his assistance along the way. And so he understands that you will never be able to accomplish what you want to accomplish except his hand is in it, and his hand is upon you at the same time. Can we talk like we're family? Here is the question. The question is, Bishop, how do I know when what I'm doing for God came from God? How? I've been asked this many times. How can I tell when it's God? I could get spooky spiritual and take you to John 10 and say his sheep know his voice, and a stranger they won't follow. So I get so sick of preachers being super deep and telling me that stupid stuff. Let me tell you why. And I ain't calling the Bible stupid. Don't send me to Judge Judy and Joe Brown. But see, the reality is, if I had heard his voice, I wouldn't be asking you what he said. No, you tell me stuff like that because you ain't got my answers. But I know you got my same problems, because sometimes you can't tell when it's God either. Sometimes you thought it was God and messed your whole life up. Because sometimes Abraham's boys look alike. Isaac and Ishmael look like each other because they had the same daddy. Okay. All I'm trying to tell you is your flesh and your spirit sometimes can look alike, but they're not alike. And sometimes you think you're hearing the voice of God, but you're hearing the voice of your flesh. So the question, Deborah, is how can I know when God is talking to me? I can't tell you if God told you or not. I wasn't there when he told you. I know you thought I had to answer, but I wasn't there when he told you. But watch this. I can tell you when it's not God. Can't tell you when it is God, but I can tell you when it's not God. Brother Franzel, it's not God when you can do it without his assistance. It ain't God. God specializes in taking little people and giving them big assignments and then giving them an anointing to cut it down. You don't believe me? He gave a little bitty boy named David an assignment to go up against a real big giant called Goliath. He took a little stone, hit him in the right spot, knocked him out, killed him, and then cut his head off. God will take little people and give them big assignments. I'm prophesying to 12 people in here right now. You thought you couldn't do it because you didn't have the right education. You came from the wrong sides of the track. You did not have the wherewithal, but God said he purposely put your little self in that big situation so you can give him an even bigger praise. Watch this. Watch this. See, when you can do it without his assistance, it did not come from God. Here comes the second one, Pastor J. When you can do it in spite of biblical contradiction, it didn't come from God. Okay, I knew we'd have to talk about this a little bit. See, the reality is, you can't tell me if the Bible says don't be unequally yoked together with unbelievers, that you can marry a dope boy and God is good with it. Oh, I'm going to change him. He going to come to church with me. If God ain't changed him in 20 years, how can your ooh change him? Okay. Contradictions ought to produce a conviction. I tell folk all the time, I'm no wise perfect, but I promise you I got conviction. I know when I'm wrong. I know how to repent. I know how to tell the Lord I'm sorry, and I'm striving to get better every day. Watch this, watch this. I know it's not God when I can do it without his assistance. I know it's not God when I can do it in spite of biblical contradiction. But watch this. I know it's not God when I can stop doing it without his permission. We got to talk about this. We got to talk about this. Because we got too many folks saying God told them to do stuff one week, and the next week you doing something else. Either God is crazy or you crazy. But the reality is, my God is not schizophrenic. My God is not two-faced. My God is not double-minded. And James said the reason you walking around with nothing is because a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Let that man think he can receive nothing from God. Watch this, watch this. I got a problem when you tell me, God, you know, God, yeah, God told me I'm going to take the city. He told me to move here, and he told me to put a church here, and I'm talking about preachers now because I'm a preacher, and God told me great things going to happen. We're going to build a cathedral. Folk going to be delivered by the droves. We're going to prophesy. We're going to have healing and deliverance services. But then in 1 year, you out the city. Oh, so God gave you a temporary mega church with thousands and healings and deliverances. Okay. God told me I'm through working for anybody. I'm going to have my own business. But you get out there and you stay in the red about 3 months and you shut down, go get you a job. And then you walk around looking crazy and say, hey, man don't want us to have nothing. And, you know, people just try to come against you. Your own people don't even want to support you. But here is the reality, whether they supported you or not. If God told you to do a thing, how can you dare stop without his permission to stop? I get an attitude. I understand, DJ, where I come. I'm from the Cooper Road. I'm from the CR Funk, baby. And I understand that I have a rep back in the day, and people knew me for being no good, a thug, a banger, a drug user, an abuser, womanizer. But they look at me and ask me a stupid question every time they see me. You still preaching? Am I what? How can I not be preaching? Woe is unto me. I don't understand a preacher who can preach today and quit tomorrow. This thing is like fire shut up in my belly. I don't want to do it, but it want to do me. Y'all ain't come to have church in here today. Somebody shout, if God didn't tell me to stop, I couldn't stop if I wanted to. Y'all sit down. Listen. Oh, God. I feel the glory. Somebody shout. I want you to shout on purpose. Somebody shout because you're still here. Shout because you survived the storm. Shout because you didn't quit. Shout because you're still motivated. Somebody shout. Now this time, Dexter, open your mouth and shout for real. I saw you. Watch this. Watch this. Watch this. Watch this. Dexter said he see everything. Yep. Watch this. Watch this. Watch this. Can we talk like we're family? Who told you you had the right to quit? Who gave you permission to stop doing what you said he told you to do? Who told you you could take a break or a pause or go on a hiatus? Who told you that things were conducive enough for you to stop doing what he told you to do? I know why you didn't do it. Because they didn't like you. So what? They didn't like you. They didn't like you before he told you to do it. So he factored in the fact that they wouldn't like you before he put you there. No, nobody loved me. So what? They don't love you. He loves you. He loves you with an unconditional love. I took some losses. So what? He gave up his son so you can do what he told you to do. I've been let down. So what? He's been let down and stood up on the cross. I got some lacerations. So what? He's got 39 stripes, wounds in his side, and he still didn't quit. Who told you you could give up? Of course I won't finish this, Jackson, but watch this. Here it is. If we believe that God put us in something, told us to do something, or gave us something, we don't have the right to stop until he tells us to stop. Look at your neighbor. Last time and only time you're going to talk to him today from me. Look at him and say, neighbor, God put hood in me. And just in case you don't understand what that means, every time I want to quit, I hear the hood song, don't stop, get it, get it. Watch this. Watch this. Watch this. You must also believe, Holmes, that he knew what you would have to go through before he placed you, told you, and gave you what he gave you. And he knew he put something on the inside of you to give you the wherewithal to handle the weather in the midst of your weakness and give you the power to walk through your wilderness. I told you I ain't got time, guys. Y'all got to give me latitude to close this. I got to catch a flight here in a minute, so let me catch a cloud right now. And thus we see the exact same scenario with these lepers within the text. They understood that they had several options, but each option concluded with them and their demise coming to pass. They come to the conclusion now that if we go into the city, we're going to die because there is a famine within the city. If we go, stay right here, brother, excuse me. We're going to die because we're dealing with the debilitating disease called leprosy. But if we go into the host of the Syrians and we give ourselves unto them, they may save us, but still there is a possibility that we are going to die. I told you the last time we came together that the reason I'm so intrigued by these 4 leprous men is because according to Levitical law, they had to colonize themselves in quarantine in the midst of their quagmire with other lepers because they had to be around people who were experiencing the same thing. Had they came out into the general public and population, as opposed to being subjected to the alienation from the Commonwealth of Israel, they could be then subjected to stoning and they could be immediately put to death. But there are 4 men that looks at the rest of the lepers and say, I'm tired of looking at people that look just like me. I'm tired of being around people who are dying like I'm dying. And then 4 of them come together and draw the conclusion that if we stay here, we're going to die. If we go there, we're going to die. If we go back there, we're going to die. We might as well make a choice to go ahead and take a chance. And I'm preaching to people now who can identify with these lepers. And you come to the conclusion that if I'm going to die, I'd rather die doing something than to die doing nothing at all. Can I preach like I feel it? Can I preach? Let me preach. I think I'll preach a little while in here. Grab your neighbor and shake their hand. Y'all ain't moving and y'all ain't shaking. Now I gave you what you like. I preached the word to you already. But the close is the preacher's praise. And I'm so glad that I gave you a little meat. And good meat produces his own gravy. But you can't put gravy on potato chips because it gets real soggy. Can I preach like I feel it? Can I preach? Let me preach. I think I'll preach a little while in here. Now grab your neighbor by their hand. Find somebody. Find somebody. Find somebody and shake their hand and say, neighbor. Say, neighbor. Neighbor. I'm so glad that I decided to take a chance like the 4 lepers did. And if I use my sanctified imagination, I can see the lepers coming to the conclusion there's too much in me to go out like this. Say to yourself, say, self, there's too much in us to go out like this. Can I preach like I feel it? Can I preach? Let me preach. I think I'll preach a little while in here. And just in case you think it's hard, too hard to bear, I got good news. The Bible says that no temptation that has taken you but such as is common to man. But God, He is faithful. He will not suffer you to be tempted above that that which you're able, but with the temptation will always make a way of escape. Touch your neighbor, say you're coming out, and the reason you're coming out is because what's on the inside. Somebody shout, I've got something on the inside of me that helps me to endure, to withstand and endure what I'm going through. I've got to close him now, but before I go out to preach in the air, I'm reminded of a little story of a country boy that went to the fair with his girlfriend and saw a booth with balls and bottles standing up, and the girl told her boyfriend, excuse me, I need somebody who's good enough to win me a bear. The boy in his pride, come up here, Pastor Jackson. The boy in his pride, he decided, surely I can win you a bear. He said, give me the ball. I'm a little league pitcher. He took the first ball, threw the ball, hit the bottle. The bottle waved, but it stood back up. He took the second ball, hit the bottle. The bottle wobbled, but it stood back up. He took the third ball, hit the bottle. It spent around, but it stood back up. He walked away with a look up the feet and an old man standing on the side. He said, son, it's not the ball and it's not the boy, it's the bottle. He said, what do you mean? He said, son, what you didn't know is when they made the bottle, they put something down on the inside, so whenever it took a blow, it would wobble, but it wouldn't fall down. It would stagger, but it wouldn't fall down. It would spin, but it wouldn't fall down. And you thought I was preaching about a bottle and a little boy and a county fair, but God told me that